Today, Kevin?
Good. We got a lot to talk about today in this historic week, incredible historic week in Ogden, Utah. So we'll start off right off the get this incredible week, and I want to talk about history and the celebration of the Transcontinental Railroad. That's what the show is going to be dedicated to, and how it was politicized this time, and I'm outraged, to be honest with you, and then we'll dive into that. But first off, let's get to the nuclear news of the day. So we have some big Fukushima breaking news that's just out within the hour. So then we'll talk about Ricardo Iki, who's fighting for her life full of leukemia in Tokyo, Japan, the most famous athlete in the world. But first off, so TEPCO today. TEPCO has developed a holding company. So today, they finally admitted they've been dumping fresh water on 1 and 3, the cores, the entire time. We're going to be on 3,000 days here just in a couple weeks of this dog and pony show. So for the first time in 3,000 days, they actually stopped pouring water just for a couple hours to get a camera in to get some heat measurements. Now you think about this. This is the hottest substance in the history of mankind. And so fresh water being dumped on it for 3,000 days on these cores. These are full blown up meltdowns that have never happened before. Pouring into the Pacific Ocean. Oh, there's no effect for that. So what this does and why this is such big news, it's verification of everything I've said the whole time. I mean, it took me 2.5 years to convince anybody this was even one meltdown, let alone the byproduct, the incredible collapse. And we have a young Navajo student with us here today.
Hello, my name is Alexis Blackline.
And so, which is going to tie in perfectly is what we want to talk about, as I do a lot of work with the Chumash in the Central Coast, mostly with the Shoshone here, but my mother was, and I want to start this off and caveat this as how I was taught, how history is taught. Now, on the 100th anniversary of the Transcontinental Railroad, we had a festival in Ogden that would blow your mind. It was a celebration, and we celebrated all the history. The good, the bad, the ugly. And everybody participated. And I mean everybody. We had giant Shoshone parades. Now my mother worked at the Intermountain Indian School when I was a boy. My grandfather is Abraham Hunsaker IV. He was married to Ella Potter Hunsaker. Ella Potter is the last living grandchild of Ike Potter, who spoke all 5 tribes' languages. One of the first early, they were fur traders. And so, by the way, Ogden, so people know, Peter Skeen Ogden was never in Ogden. I mean, if you're going to name it after the first whitey in Ogden, the town should be named after Jim Bridger, which Jim Bridger assimilated with the native culture, his native wife. But, so, here's when I want to start this out. I want to tell a story about the Intermountain Indian School, which was all Navajo when I was a boy. So, and my grandparents lived in Brigham City. Abraham Hunsaker IV. Abraham Hunsaker I is the guy who found the first transcontinental railroad. And history is important. I got in a big argument out there about history. Oh, well, now, remember, this is a history professor. Tell me, history doesn't really matter, we can forget it. I says, what? History doesn't matter to a history professor? I mean, talk about an oxymoron.
Exactly.
We want to get history right. We want to talk about all of it, the good, the bad, the ugly. So I'll start this off with a story. So I was a good distance runner when I was a kid. I ran against the likes of Ed Eyestone himself, who I know who's the Olympic coach. He's the BYU marathon coach. He ran 2 Olympics. I ran against him. It'd be he and I going at it. I ran for Walquist Junior High. He ran for T.H. Bell. Well, in the 70s, my coach in the 8th grade at Walquist Junior High was a guy named Gary Reed. So we got invited to a meet at the Intermountain Indian School. I ran the half mile in those days, which was called the 880. I'll never forget this. And I'd been on that campus, the Intermountain Indian School in Brigham City, lots of my life because my mother worked there. So, and it was all Navajo. And I used to always say, Mom, the boys are more beautiful than the girls. And the girls are beautiful. They got this beautiful long straight hair. And so my coach was a smart guy. And he's like, Kevin, wait till you see these guys run. Now he says, I want you to run the mile today. And I says, no, I don't like running the mile. I'm going to run the half mile. And so he's like, no, you run the mile. Well, I'm used to running the half, 880. So I go out, and it's several schools at the Intermountain Indian School, it was called. There's an eye up on the hill. I'll never forget, well, I break fast when I run the half. Well, this native boy, he breaks faster than me, and I'm thinking to myself while I'm running, I'm thinking, he must think we're running the half. He cannot be running a mile at this pace. So it started to stretch out. He's out there by 300-400 yards, then me, then the pack. I'm trying to keep pace. You know, I'm like, can't go anywhere, but I'm thinking to myself, he's got to think we are running the half and not the mile. Well, we keep going. He don't stop. We get to the half point, you know, and I'm going at an incredible pace. I think I broke my personal best that day at the half and the mile. And this guy just stretches out, and his hair, I'll never forget, it's just flowing in the wind like he's going to fly. Now, years later, I met the great native distance runner on this campus who won the 10,000 meters in the 1968 Mexico Games, native Mills. I have an autograph poster from him. So, anyway, my coach, when we ran down, I ran second, and this guy daylighted me. I mean, he beat me by so far, it was unreal. And I'll never forget, Gary took out his stopwatch, and he says, look, he says, you set your personal best, Kevin. I'm like, wow. And I still lost by how far? And he says, look at his time. And he pulled out the stuff. I says, that's the Utah State record. He would have shattered the record. They don't recognize the native school in the record books. I says, what? What? He ran the half, I think, would have broke the junior high record at the half marker. So this is what I want to talk about.
The Intermountain School was shut down, and there's not a building very much anymore.
No.
I heard there's a small museum. I've seen it, but that's about it for...
Well, we're going to have a reunion this summer for the first time. And so there was a furniture factory in there. A lot of people don't know this. And Goddard, who ended up being the mayor of Ogden many years ago, he had a furniture factory in there. And so they made furniture in there. They had the Navajos, but it didn't last that long. I mean, that ties into, you know, and I want to tie this all together culturally. So we all know about the Carlisle School, right? The Carlisle School is forward because who went to the Carlisle School? Probably the greatest athlete in American history. He was a Comanche. His name was Jim Thorpe, who broke, I mean, forget about it. You know, well, you want to talk athlete. He broke the world record in the freaking long jump the first time he ever long jumped. Newt Rockney said he'd walk by the school every day, you know, and say, well, I can do that. And finally, he got tired of listening to him and says, here, he says he had dress shoes on and a suit. He's playing against the #1 team in the country, you know. He says, here, and he punted to him, and he ran back the kickoff. Because he says, I want him to do the hardest thing there was a punt, kickoff return. He said, oh my God, do that again. And he did it again. Of course, we know his story. He ended up being probably the greatest athlete in American history. And so the reason I want to talk about this is this historic town, this historic place, the Shoshone land. So we had the 150th anniversary of the Transcontinental Railroad, which, if you don't think that changed the world, you know nothing. Good, bad, ugly. So I went to the ceremony 50 years ago. 50 years ago, John Wayne was the keynote speaker.
You were 8.
I was 9.
9. Sorry.
Then Johnny Cash played. It was an incredible festival. It was so fun. It was amazing. I will never forget it. Hundreds of thousands of people. I mean, it was so, the whole town. Natives alike, the fur trappers, you know, the Renaissance guy. I mean, the writers, the poets, the historians from all over the world. Oh, they were all here. You name it. They were here. And it went on and on and on. So this year I was so excited it was coming. You know, my grandfather's, the first office was in his house in Huntville, which is Hunsakerville, and I grew up knowing so much about Native culture because of my grandmother, my mother. So I was taught when I was a kid history. It goes like this. My grandma would say, "Here's how we do it," because I mean she was so much into the Native ways. She says, when we talk history, when you stand up and talk, Kevin, any place you are, first you say, "I am Kevin Blanche." You always speak of your grandparents. You know, both sides. I am the son, I am the grandson, I am the son, and we pass down verbal history. And that's the way I was taught as a boy. And that's the way people did it in this town. And our history department of Weber State is a powerhouse. Was. It's not now. So this event was coming up. So we got a federal grant here at Weber State. Supposedly, we thought we did. So I just found this out today because I was so outraged. The whole event was completely politicized. Military police presence everywhere. Snipers on roofs. We had people from all over the world, but the crowds were much, much smaller than we expected. And it was going to be run through Ogden, which it's always run through Ogden. The Shoshone dance, the Native tribes do their gig, the Chinese do their gig, you know, the price they paid. We talk about the blood, we talk about the genocide, we talk about the murder, we talk about it all of it. Good, bad, ugly. So I was pissed off at Weber State, so I go up their special collections today. I've been waiting all weekend to have it out with them. What the hell? So she says, "Oh no, Kevin, don't you know?" "Know what?" She says, "We had the whole show ready to go like we always do, running out of Ogden. You know, Governor Herbert and the Trump administration stepped in and says, 'Nope, you're out.'" I said, "What do you mean, nope, you're out?" She pulled it all away from us. And the governor's office took the whole thing over, and the Trump administration took the entire ceremony. And I'm telling you, the whole thing was incredible political. The whole thing just turned political. I was so violated. We've been waiting a long time. I have two, 8-year-old grandsons who are the heirs of this line.
I saw your pictures of it.
Yeah, with them two holding hands together in front of the trains.
Mm-hmm.
But, I'm friends with a lot of the Shoshone. The Bear River Massacre, I do that event, blah, 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 the history. So it is nothing more than an attempt to rewrite history. That's all it is. So, which isn't going to work. We have a thing called the internet, and
they don't count on that. People are more informed today.
The young people are, because they grew up with the internet.
Well, in the old parts like me, who know about the whereabouts of the year.
Well, you're a rare bird. You're a you're one of them crazy Mexicans that can end up on high grade. Which, by the way, what are Mexicans? What?
Indigenous.
Bingo! They got bred by some crazy Spaniards that were looting gold, right?
Right, exactly.
Now, number one, the statue at Old Town in San Diego is my great-grandfather, and so the Spaniards didn't pummel San Diego because they thought it was heaven. I always talk about Polk, when Polk invaded, and Taylor's soldiers invaded Mexico. They said the same thing about Mexico City that they said about San Diego. When they got there, they thought they were in heaven.
Yes.
So I always quote Russell Means, and I know a lot of people don't like Russell Means because he was a celebrity, blah, 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 but I like him.
Yeah.
I always liked him.
I was in a movie with him.
You were?
Yes.
Wow.
Which movie was you in?
It's called Wind River. It's not the new one that came out last year. It's an older one.
Oh, I loved him.
And it's about a white boy who is adopted into the Comanche tribe because he runs away from home because he doesn't want to be there anymore as a farmer. So the natives take him in and teach him their ways. But then eventually there's a war because settlers think they stole him or something.
Well, that ties in perfectly because, a lot of people don't know this, but Comanches and Shoshone are cousins. Mm-hmm. And they'll tell you that And so, who was Thorpe? He was a Comanche.
He was one of the best athletes we ever
Oh,
had.
the best. It's unarguable. He's the greatest athlete in the history of this country.
Exactly.
In multiple sports.
Multiple medals.
Another famous native actor I met was Gail Birmingham on the set of Yellowstone that's being produced by Paramount Networks here in the Valley.
Nice.
He's also Comanche.
Is he?
Yes.
Awesome.
So he was on the series Twilight as Jacob's father. In the wheelchair.
So Russell Means is my favorite quote, and I ad-lib a little bit on the quote, as you know. So Russell Means says, "You Bible thumpers come across here with your books and your guns and your disease, and you come here and you preach to us and you tell us, manifest destiny on chemo, as I call it, and you tell us how we're going to get to heaven. You read our books, do this with your heaven." He says, "I got news for you. Before you got here, this was heaven. We had no locks, we had no disease, we had no jails." I love that quote. And I grew up in Ogden, out in the boondocks, out west, and the wigwams were still there. And I got raised by, my mom was friends with the chief.
There was no agenda. I mean, for the most part, they knew what they had to do, like get up early in the morning and feed the animals. And,
work hard.
Yeah.
Find something to eat, find more shelter,
Tend to the livestock, and, it was just a regular day. Like, of course they would make things like clothes for themselves.
Beautiful clothes, by the way. Are you kidding?
But the women did a lot of the work, as far as the home, and the men were the farmers, so.
And, well, again, I go back. I used to play in the wigwams, and the chief, I was friends with him. I have a couple paintings that he did. I have the couches from my grandma's house that everybody's like, I says, when my grandmother died, the cousins, I says, I'll go last. You guys' only taste is in your mouth. And then, by the way, my two Shoshone cousins, those girls, and I tell everybody they're the most beautiful, going on 70-year-olds in the world. Yeah, they have the long, beautiful straight hair. And I says, they're like, and their husbands are like, yeah. And I'm like, I'll let you go. Your husband's got no taste except for in you. You got you, I say. So
You want to talk about beautiful long hair.
Well, the Navajos, like I said.
Their hair is just unbelievable.
Well, look at the Navajo art and the way they dressed.
Yes.
There's a young woman up here right now that I'm friends with her grandma, Shoshone, which, by the way, her son's called Soso Goya. That's what the Shoshone call me, because I walked the coast to California while dying of cancer, documenting the Fukushima catastrophe in the pools, and I would rant and rave and sing when I was talking. I'd always, I'd do kind of a Shoshone prayer every morning, and I'd say, "First came the god of salmon, then came the god of water," because how's the god of salmon going to live? He has to have water, so water came second. And so I'd rant and rave, and so they started calling me Soso Goya. So my friend, who's the Shoshone, the real one, who really talks, not Perry, who was raised by Whitey's, who I really am mad at him. Don't even get me going. But I call him Soso Goya Cheeseburger. I says, "Good Lord, you've gained some weight." And he's like, "Yeah, tell me." So, but my whole point to this is turning this political. And this is important, because I'm the only one that has got up in all these politicians' face with this camera, right here on this campus, and asked you can Google it, Mike Lee and I going at it. Mike Lee's father was a downwinder, yet Mike Lee wants to bring nuclear waste in here. Mike Lee's father grew up in southern Utah. And this is important, real important, because we want to talk a little bit about the Shoshone never got a reservation.
That's what you were telling me.
They got slaughtered. Do not kid yourself. The Bear River Massacre, 500, but that's just the tip of the iceberg. So the res is down there. Okay, southern Utah is probably the cancer capital of the world. We have uranium tailings all over the place. So this whole, Carson was here in Ogden. Kit Carson was here in Ogden. He takes the fall for the, burning the corn, right? Pushing them out, walking them to death. Well, Carson Carson lived here. He was an Ogden boy. But Jim Bridger was here before him. You know, he had a native wife, Kit Carson, and he takes the fall in history books around here. But really, who did it? The same, it's political now as it was political then. The powers there be. Now, we have the powwow back, right?
Yes, we had a very successful powwow these last few years since I've been on campus.
And it was one of the biggest. I've
2
ever
years.
seen.
It's been back for 2 years. This is only the second one. They took it away from us, and so
3 years.
Three. That's right.
Years, wow.
But it wasn't consecutive. We had a break.
Yeah,
so.
you had a break, but years ago we had it every year. I mean, it was a major event around here, and so, but the older Shoshone dancer, I'm friends with him, and he's about my age. He's a little older. He's the last of the dancing Mohicans, I call him. And so, but he's taught the young. We have 5 young people on this campus, males. Now, the females too. We're getting a few, but oh, can these young guys dance? He has taught them, and he'll even tell you, he says, "I can't believe how quickly they're learning." Well, that's who the young people are in this campus. So we have to keep this alive. People say, oh, no, history matters. History matters. I have a native belief system. You know, I believe that, I mean, I'm not an atheist. I believe in the hereafter, and I have a very native belief system. In a native belief system, history means everything. You know, as your evolution of your spirit. You know, it needs to take the next place. And I want my spirit, I was given too much to live. So the history, I'm very passionate about it. I grew up in this town. I watched it. And for this to be politicized, this incredible historic event. I mean, the transcontinental railroad, if you don't think that changed the world, good, bad, and ugly, in my opinion, mostly ugly, you know nothing. You know, so the Chinese, I did a lot of work about the Chinese this time, which built 25th, which I call 25th Street the Road of Blood.
Because those railroads, they were built by Chinese and Mexican people, right?
Irish, mostly Chinese.
Mostly
but the Chinese were slaves. And a lot of native slave labor.
Wow.
The Chinese were pure slaves. They imported slavery.
Because it was a very, very important immigration of Mexicans to build the railroad.
Yeah.
And those brought the wheat.
Yeah.
Yes, that's how wheat came to the U.S. by the Mexican workers working on the railroad.
But what did they do with the Chinese slaves when they were done with them?
Well, one thing I found that interesting that you said was the attempt to rewrite history. That's like what you said your mother worked at the Intermountain School for Natives, Navajos, and that's something that's they've demolished the whole entire.
Nobody knows anything
building.
about it.
Yes, and I remember as a child there was a powwow out there, and I've danced there once before, but ever since then people have talked about it, and it's something that's brought up every once in a while because they remember it, but it's not something that's active today. So this museum that they've built, I'm sure a lot of that history is rewritten. If you go to like if you go to the Museum of Heritage in Phoenix, there's a lot of stories about the boarding school. They have a separate section about like how they would cut off the natives' hair. They had visuals and pictures of the uniforms they would wear and all that kind of stuff, the chairs that they would sit them in and how they would punish them. I mean, that's kind of more realistic,
Yes.
like, along those lines, like,
Yes.
but,
I never sat in one of those classes up there. My mom was, she worked in the bank, and then she was a teacher for a little while. So I don't know what went on there. I would get to go with my mom on a field trip and just walk through the halls and see, and I was fascinated. But I surely didn't see what went on there, and I have no clue what went on in that
well, it
side
would be
there.
nice if it kind of came back to life and the significance of that would be there within that community, because I know, like, Salt Lake, they have a lot of different native tribes, not just Navajo, but Utes and Shoshone and
We have
Paiutes and
our main 5, we call them.
yeah, there's a lot, and when you get them together, I mean, the newer thing that's in now is powwows, because powwows wasn't something that was traditional to even my tribe, the Diné tribe, and we didn't practice powwows, and so that's kind of a newer thing that's big within Native communities because a lot of the students, they feel connected more when they're involved in those things. And if you go to a reservation, you'll see that they don't offer those kinds of things on the reservations, like culture classes and how to make your own moccasins and how to like learn your own traditions. Here it's more prevalent in the cities. They offer these classes because the kids here in the cities, they want to be connected to their tribes. And a big thing that is especially important when you're acknowledging Native Americans or even the Chinese, for example, when you're having this celebration with the redwood, would be hospitality, because Natives, they appreciate hospitality and just being acknowledged and thanks for, you know, all the things that have happened. Doesn't matter whether it's good or bad or ugly, like you said. But the Chinese are the same way, you know, because they understand what's happened to their people and they understand why. But just that acknowledgement goes a long way, especially in this day and age, because like you said, people tend to forget or rewrite history, and that's unfair for them.
So what do you think? Okay, so that's my whole point here. My whole point is I understand all that, and we always understood this at this university. Are you kidding? This is the likes of Wallace Stegner, Bernard DeVoto's from Ogden, Utah, across the way, Missouri. Fawn McKay Brody. We're talking some of the greatest historians in the history of this country who all talked exactly like that. So to shut them out would be the opposite of saying, hey, hospitality.
It's no surprise from the Trump administration. I mean, you hear about all these ridiculous things that he does, like feeding, you know, McDonald's food, you know. It's like you can have that any time of the day, but I mean.
Well, when the great Indian killer, Andrew Jackson, he stands in front of that photograph to have the photo ops with the Navajos.
And that's what people are going to remember, you know, like how they were treated.
Yeah.
That was very insulting.
Yeah.
And like it said, that's my point here. That is my absolute point. We should celebrate all our culture and heritage and be hospitable. I mean, that's what we do. Everybody participate, right? That's what college radio is for.
Exactly.
You know, and so that's my point. That's my whole point here, and that's why I'm so outraged about it.
One more thing that I want to say is that by DNA and by language, Utes and Aztecs are the same thing. Bingo.
Yeah. And so, by the way, I want to tell you something. Correct me if I'm wrong on this. You probably know this, but I was always taught. Okay, we're told that Ute means top of the mountain or in Utah means a Ute word for top of the mountain. My friend who's a Ute says, oh, no. He says, that's a slang. They made that up. It's slang. They thought that's what it said. Same with Idaho means sunlight running down the face. He says, oh, no. They thought that's what they heard. And they just make these words up. It's slang.
Oh, wow.
And so that makes sense to me.
The word Navajo is actually derived from the Spanish as well, because we call ourselves a Diné, where we don't call ourselves a Navajo people.
Is that right?
We're called Navajo by the